As with the previous problem, you're asked here to simplify each one of these expressions completely, except now you're going to have problems that are dealing with having either radicals or rational exponents. You also see some negative exponents making their way into the problem. Ultimately, when you simplify each expression, you want to have positive exponents only. And in this case, because you're directed to, you want only exponents. So radicals should be written as rational exponents when you're done as well. So sometimes you might see directions that ask you to do the opposite of that and change everything back to radical forms. So be aware that that might be a possibility as well. So we're going to do these two at a time on the pages here. So you have the square root of this entire fraction, 32x to the negative 5, y to the ninth, all over to x to the third, y to the sixth. The way this is written in top hat is kind of hard to tell, but this is all intended to be underneath the radical. So this entire fraction's under the radical, whereas sometimes you just might have the radical in the numerator only or the denominator only. So you have to make sure you keep track of what's kind of situation that you do have. Radicals act like grouping symbols as well. So this is going to be simplified first. You could try to raise everything here to a 1/2 power, but that gets a little bit problematic. And the 32 divided by 2 works a lot better if you simplify that first before you apply the power of 1/2 for the square root. So because you're doing positive exponent forms, this is rewritten. A couple things are done. First, the square roots turn into an exponent of 1/2 because it's the same thing. And as before, the coefficients, the powers of x and the powers of y were separated. You could do that mentally. You don't necessarily have to write it out, but just trying to show you here, that's how it's going to be done here. 32 divided by 2 is 16. X to the negative 5 divided by x to the 3. You have negative 5 minus 3, which is negative 8. So you have x to the negative 8. Here you have y to the ninth divided by y to the 6th. 9 minus 6 is going to give you the 3. And of course, that's all raised to the 1/2. Now, you're going to raise each. This is simplified pretty much in here as much as you'd like it to be. So now it's going to raise all these to the 1/2 power. Keeping in mind that taking 16 and raising it to the 1/2 power is doing the square root of 16. It was written as a square root here because 16 is a perfect square. This is going to become an integer. Here, you're multiplying the negative 8 and the 3 by 1/2, which will give you a negative 4 and a 3/2 respectively for the exponents. So when you finish writing this, this is going to become a 4. This x is going to move to the denominator to make this become a positive power of 4. And then the y to the 3/2 is going to be in the numerator. So you're going to have 4y to the 3/2 over x to the 4 to have this in the right format. For this one here, what's inside the radical is pretty much simplified as it is. So changing the cube root into a 1/3 power, and then each one of these is going to get raised to the 1/3 power. Now, keeping in mind that taking 8 and raising it to the 1/3 power is the same thing as doing a cube root. And 8 is a perfect cube. So if you do the cube root of 8, you do get 2. Here you're going to have 12 divided by 3 or 4. Negative 9 divided by 3 is going to give you a negative 3. So you have 2x to the 4th, y to the negative 3. And to write it in the final format, for it to be completely simplified, you want positive exponents. So this negative 3, in order to turn it to a positive exponent, needs to be moved to the denominator. So 2x to the 4th over y to the 3rd is the final answer. This one here. Now here inside this grouping symbol, there's really nothing to do. Only the numerator is being raised to the 2/3 power, not the denominator. So everything inside here is going to be raised to the 2/3 power. That's going to give you negative 64 to the 2/3, x to the 12/3, y to the 6/3. And of course you have 8xy squared down here because nothing's been done yet, because it's really the denominator simplifies you're going to get. If you do negative 64 to the 2/3 power, well, The 1/3 part of it, a third, is going to be a cube root, and if you take the cube root of -64, you get -4, and if you square that, you get 16. So -64 to the 2/3 is 16. That's going to be over the 8, which is the coefficient. The 12 divided by 3 becomes an exponent of 4, so you have x to the 4th divided by x to the 1st, because that's what x is raised to here. And y to the 6 over 3, 6 over 3 is 2, so you have y squared over y squared. 16 divided by 8 is 2. These are going to cancel, and when you divide these two, you're going to subtract the exponents to get x cubed. So you're going to have 2x cubed being the final answer for this in simplified form. Now, that's not to say that there'll be times that if you pay attention to what's going on, you don't necessarily have to do a lot of work on the inside. In prior examples, I've always shown, well, I'm going to simplify what's on the inside first. I can certainly do that here, but I do see this exponent of 0. It's not really as high as I'd like to see it, but that's the way Top Hat writes them. This whole thing is being raised to a 0 power. Well, that's just going to be 1 because of that exponent rule of raising something to a 0 power is 1. So that is the end of this problem, and that is the end of this video. If you have any additional questions, please make sure to bring them up during class.